Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. So, you open up Facebook and every second chicken group is talking about bird flu. One person says all backyard chickens are at risk. Another one says it's the media fear-mongering. Someone else says they're doing it on purpose to make egg prices double. Meanwhile, you're standing there looking at your 6 hens and wondering whether or not you should actually be worried. Well, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Australia has officially detected the H5N1 strain of bird flu that's been causing problems around the world, and naturally people are asking questions. Can backyard chickens catch it? Should you lock up your birds? Will it affect egg supplies? And what practical steps can you take to try and help with your livestock? So, welcome to Ditch the Store, episode 170, bird flu in Australia. That's what we're talking about this week. I'm CJ from Mojo Homestead and I am a chicken farmer, so this is very, very important to me and dear to my heart, so I need to know as much as you do about it. So before we start, a few housekeeping tips. If you're not on our email list, go over to www.mojohomestead.net and jump on our email list. You will be notified of things that are new and up and coming. Also, you'll be notified if we have freebies coming out. I'm just trying to get a real pattern going with my emails at the moment. So hopefully soon you'll start receiving emails with freebies in each email, hopefully. And also too, eggs without cartons. We're still working on our photos, but the next book will be coming out shortly. We already have Brewed at a Plate available on Amazon. I'll put links in show notes so that if you are thinking about keeping birds for meat purposes, you can go and have a look at that, Brewed at a Plate. And shortly, and if you're on the mailing list, you'll get notified first, Eggs Without Cartons, about keeping backyard chickens if you're not already keeping backyard chickens. So if you are, this episode is for people who have chickens or who are thinking about getting chickens, and you might be a little bit concerned about the bird flu situation. So we'll get into it and discuss what exactly it is. So it's really important to know that bird flu is not new. It's been around. There's been different strains, like the human influenza virus. There is different strains of bird flu that have been around for years. And many years ago, when I was pregnant with MJ, I actually caught a version of, I want to say swine flu. I actually can't remember. It's that long ago, 16 years ago. But somebody had come back into my workplace from Singapore, and Singapore was in the middle of an epidemic of this particular, it was either bird flu or swine flu, I can't remember. So whatever was 16 years ago. And I got sick really, really quick because I was pregnant and my immune system was shot. And I ended up at the doctor's, and the doctor put me in quarantine, and I had these massive doses of antibiotics, which obviously it didn't affect MJ. She was born healthy and happy, but it was still a scary time for me because, you know, whenever there's anything that humans can catch, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. But this particular avian influenza, the real issue that we have here in Australia is that we are an isolated island. And so anytime where anything gets kind of brought in from somewhere else and can impact our agricultural sector, it's not a good thing. Most of these strains will circulate amongst wild bird populations and we never even know about it. But the strain that is currently making headlines here is H5N1, that's what it's referred to. And like I say, there's all different strains of avian influenza, avian influenza, and this one is just the strain that is current at the moment. Now, it's been discovered on a beach in Western Australia, is my understanding. There were 2 birds that are seabirds, wild birds, who washed up dead and were tested. And, you know, we have like I say, because we're a closed island kind of circuit, our agricultural department does do monitoring of any kind of wildlife dying in weird situations. So they do test from time to time, and particularly birds that are seabirds that have come in from other countries, they will test them. I wish they were. I wish they'd been as vigilant as that with stuff coming in off ships, because we have varroa mite here in Australia now with our bees, and that was something that we'd never been exposed to, and it came in off a shipping container. There was a bee's nest in the shipping container, and the varroa mite is a very it's a bug that lives quite happily on bees, and it had been brought in that way, or at least that's the information that was given to us. I sometimes don't know what to believe in mainstream media anymore, but it is a highly pathogenic, I have to read this because I'll fuck it up, highly pathogenic avian influenza. So they refer to it as a HPAI, which means that it's really easy to transmit between birds. And that's why the authorities take it so seriously, because like COVID, which, I mean, let's face it, COVID was just a different variant of a flu. Okay, it was an influenza virus, but it was a variant that was very easy to catch. And there's lots of variants of these things that are very easy to catch. So I don't want you to panic about this, but it's probably better to go into it with a bit of knowledge so that you don't panic and so that you can take any precautions that you think you might need to. Now, the difference between low pathogenic and high pathogenic is that one is particularly virile and will transmit very easily, and that's why we get concerned about avian flu. The poultry industries are the ones that are really going to stress about this, not necessarily us homesteaders with just backyard chickens, but we still need to know stuff about it. So most people only started hearing about bird flu recently. Oh, excuse me. Have not been sleeping well lately. I apologise for yawning. Most people have only been hearing about bird flu recently, and it probably everything that happened with COVID has made people nervous about the idea of influenza hitting again. But it has been around for years and years. And if you weren't into homesteading, if you didn't have chickens, you probably hadn't heard of it before, but anybody that's worked in the poultry industry, commercial hatcheries, commercial breeders, commercial egg laying productions, anything like that, they are aware of it. They're 100% aware of it, and they have been dealing with it for a very, very long time. So don't think for a second that just because you've only heard about it in the last couple of years that it's only a new thing. It's not. It's been around for ages. So what actually happened in Australia? Like I say, it's hard to believe what you hear in mainstream media, but my understanding is 2 birds washed up on a WA beach, so that's a Western Australian beach, so on the west coast of Australia, and they were tested, and the testing came back showing that they have the H5N1 virus, and that's what killed them. They caught the flu and died from it, essentially. They were wild birds. They weren't chickens in a hatchery or in a commercial environment, but authorities are obviously monitoring it really closely because we have chicken hatcheries all around Australia, and because it's such a virulent version of the flu, if it goes into, like if one bird gets it in a commercial hatchery, chances are it'll spread like wildfire through them. So that's why they watch it so carefully, because obviously it can have a huge impact on the commercial hatcheries and commercial egg laying productions in Australia. So biosecurity measures get upped when they have this kind of thing happen. And we'll talk all about biosecurity, because biosecurity is something that's really important even for homesteaders. In fact, I would say more important for homesteaders. I'm certainly very attached to my biosecurity things that I have in place. And I don't like it if somebody tries to bully me into going around them. But the main issue is going to be commercial poultry, and they will be the focus of surveillance. There will be testing done in commercial hatcheries and egg laying productions, and it's really important for us as homesteaders just to keep an eye on the news. And like I say, it's really hard. Sometimes you don't know what to believe in mainstream media, but if you go to the Department of Agriculture page, they should have updates about where, like with the varroa mite, with the beekeeping, they should have updates about where the H5N1 flu has been detected in Australia and when it's detected. So it's probably best to go directly to that source and keep an eye on that so that if it comes to an area near you, you can then, take any necessary precautions that you might need to take. But Australia has been aware of bird flu for years. We've had issues in the past with other things coming into the country. Like I said, the varroa mite with bees. We've also had hand, foot and mouth with cattle that came in off a visitor from Bali, is the understanding that I had from the information. Was somebody been in Bali, they'd been on a farm, there was hand, foot and mouth with cattle, and that person came back into Australia without washing their shoes and went to visit a farm, and that ended up, it's one of those viruses where it just runs rampant through animals once it gets a hold of them. So they went to visit a farm with their dirty shoes from the farm in Bali, and hand, foot, mouth went through, and we had a period of about 6 months where everybody was monitoring their cattle to make sure that they didn't have hand, foot and mouth. And when I say hand, foot and mouth, it's the same virus that causes hand, foot and mouth in kids, but it's the cattle version of it, is my understanding. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor. I should say that from the get-go. So this is just my understanding from dealing with my own animals. Now, it comes in via migratory birds. So like I say, the seabirds that landed in WA that died from it, they're the ones that carry it from one country to another. We can't stop them. Keep that in mind. You can't stop migration of birds from one country to another across seas. It's impossible. Like, it's impossible to predict that and to restrict it. All we can do is monitor wildlife, put surveillance in place so that if animals are dying and getting sick, then we can monitor that, test and see if it is from the H5N1 virus. And that's, I think, because you can't control the migratory birds, that's why government agencies get so worked up about this, because they've got no way of controlling it. They really can only monitor the situation and try and advise people what to do once it's already here. But just because we've had 2 birds come into Australia, that doesn't mean the sky is falling, and it doesn't mean that, it's all over, get rid of your chickens, that kind of thing. Healthy chickens that are not exposed to it are not going to be an issue. And just because we've had it in one particular spot, that doesn't mean it's going to spread. If they do the right thing and contain that area and make sure that, they're kind of pushing back to not allow it to spread further than that, then we should be right. That being said, I still think it's important to know about this, and I think it's important that you keep an eye on those Department of Ag pages to see if it is coming anywhere near you. Now, you don't need thousands of chickens for bird flu to matter. Honestly, a small flock can still be impacted if a wild bird comes over and passes on avian flu to your flock. It can wipe out the whole flock. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It's sad, and everybody's got this favourites like us with poor old Agnes, the queen matriarch of the flock. If she died from avian flu, I'd be devastated. But there's nothing I can do to predict that. All I can do is put some things in place to try and prevent it as best as possible. But the potential impacts, particularly for commercial chicken establishments, is loss of birds, obviously. Movement restrictions will come into play if the Department of Ag deem that that it is here on Australian soil and they're trying to prevent it going any further. Yes, there will likely be egg shortages in some areas. If an area is hit with avian flu, then obviously hatcheries have to close down. If birds are dying, then there's going to be less eggs, so there will be egg shortages. And this is another reason to ditch the store and have your own chickens, is that if it's not happening in your area and you're not reliant on supermarket eggs, you're only getting the ones out of your backyard, then those egg shortages aren't going to affect you. There could be some changes to feed costs where, there's always somebody who sees an opportunity in these kind of situations and marks up prices and things like that. But it could also impact supply chain supply chain areas where feed is not getting to certain areas. If there's chicken supplies coming out of a certain area, they're not going to be transporting things if they're worried about avian flu being contaminating those areas. But again, like I said, if you've got your own chickens, you can avoid the egg shortage issue. If you've got your own meat birds, you can avoid any kind of meat chicken supply issues. And that's why food resilience is so important. But you still have to take some precautions because nobody wants their chickens to get sick from bird flu. Now, how is it spread? This is probably the most important thing for us as small backyard producers of chickens and egg growers. There's 4 common pathways that any disease is spread with animals, and some of them you can have control over and some you have no control over. So it's really important not to get so worked up about the areas that you can't control. That being said, there are things you can put in place to help you avoid issues from those areas. So the main one for avian flu is wild birds. Waterfowl, ducks and migratory birds are the main ones. They don't stay in the one spot. They move around. Now, we have wild ducks here. We have thousands of wild ducks on the place. We've got 5 dams, so the ducks hang out at the dam all the time. They're walking through the paddock. We've got plovers here. We've seen a very big increase in our bird life since we have started our practices of regenerative farming, which is great. It's great to have those kind of wild birds, but with them, they bring a risk. Excuse me. And that risk is that they'll bring diseases with them. Now, it's not just avian flu. They'll bring other diseases with them as well. Merrick's disease, which is another disease which affects birds in Australia. Wild birds are the main transmitter of that. Now, the next one to think about is contaminated feed. Wild birds, when they are around your chickens, they sometimes, and we have that problem here with a lot of smaller birds like sparrows and things like that, getting into the chicken pen and eating the chicken feed. Now, it doesn't happen on a massive scale, but it only takes one bird that's got contamination issues to come in and go through the food to drop any of that virus, any of that bug into their food. So if wild birds can get into your chicken feed, you probably need to find a better system where you can block that. And contaminated water is the other one. We have a big tray up there that we use for water. And I've said to the handy helper a couple of times lately, we really need to set up a drip feeder system and just have the drip feeders. Wild birds are probably less likely to go the drip feeder than they are the big open water source, especially when we've got dams here. They're more likely to go to the dams, which our chickens are not around the dams. But a drip feeder that wild birds can't access is your best defence against contaminated water. Now, the last one, the 4th one that causes the most amount of transfer of viruses is humans. And humans do it without even realising they're doing it. Boots, tyres, equipment, anything like that they're walking from another farm onto your farm or onto your property, they can be bringing contaminants with them on their boots, on their equipment, on their tyres. And it's part of the reason why I won't let anybody drive through our top gate, through our second gate. They can drive up to the first gate, but I won't let anybody drive through the second gate if we believe that they've been near other chickens or other goats, because I don't want that coming onto our property. The front paddock, I can kind of control the access to that. Anybody that comes through into the top paddocks, they have to either be coming from a place of no other animals, or I would insist if anybody had to come through for anything, because we have power lines that run across our property, and the power people, they try and drive through. They tried to drive through probably 6 months ago, and I stood at the gate and said, no, you can walk up and check the power lines. You're not driving up there. And I said, before you walk up there, here's a bucket. I want you to wash your boots. Because I don't want them carting crap into my property that I can't control. And that's the biggest issue with biosecurity. But it comes down to common sense. You know, anybody that's been around other animals, don't let them on your property. That's the simplest way. So, practical security for backyards, biosecurity, sorry, for backyards. This is where you can have some real control. And I think knowing this and enacting this will make you a little bit more confident about this whole situation and less concerned about it and less fearful about it. Secure feed is the first one. Obviously, contaminated feed from wild birds is the big issue. So don't leave feed sitting around outside of their pen where wild animals can get to it. You want to have their feed in a situation where you can have it inside their pen, only they can access it. Have the pen so that it's, got a lid on it and wild birds aren't coming down and coming straight into your pen. That type of thing is going to be a godsend for you. If you can do that and restrict any wild birds getting any of their food, then your chances of having an issue is going to be so much reduced. And the same goes for water. Like I said, drip feeders, instead of a big tray of water, drip feeders. If wild birds aren't accessing the water that the chickens are accessing, and if that's the only water that the chickens are accessing, then you're going to be very safe in that regard as well. It's going to stop any kind of issues from wild birds. And it's not, like I say, it's not just avian flu, Marek's disease, which is a horrible disease, where they'll die from it. That is spread predominantly by wild birds. So you don't want wild birds in with your chickens because you can't control where they've been and you can't control what they're bringing with them and what viruses they've been exposed to. Now, if you're bringing any new birds in, quarantine them for 2 to 4 weeks and avoid impulse purchases. Day-old chickens that have been vaccinated generally aren't going to have been exposed to anything, but always do due diligence. Always check that they're coming from a hatchery that monitors those kinds of things and has really good biosecurity and all that kind of thing. You don't want to be buying from a backyard breeder who doesn't have great biosecurity measures in place and exposes their birds to things that you can't control. So if you do buy birds from somewhere else, day-olds or point of lay, quarantine them for at least 2 to 4 weeks before you put them near any other birds that you have on your property. It's just going to allow you time to see if there's an issue. And my understanding with avian flu is it comes on pretty quick with birds. So you'd be able to see that they're sick and unwell and that there's something clearly wrong. And we'll discuss what the symptoms are in a sec. Dedicated chicken boots. It sounds silly, but honestly, my gum boots here don't leave the farm. I've just got a pair of Merry boots that the kids and the handy helper bought me, and I've just been able to use them. Now, my Merry boots, I'm going to actually get 2 pairs, and 1 pair is going to be for me to wear to kids' sports in town, and the other pair is going to be for me to wear on the farm. And that might sound like overkill, but I don't want to be tracking stuff that I've picked up in town back onto the farm. Any boots that are on the farm, stay on the farm. And that's my farm boots, my work boots that I wear on the farm. If I wear them to another farm, I wash the soles of them when I get back to my farm to try and prevent anything coming back with me. And there's only 2 farms that we visit anyway, where we still go and do some mowing for some people that are not able to do the mowing themselves. And I obviously haven't done that for a while with my busted leg, but yeah, when I was doing it, I would wash my boots when I come back, and so would the handy helper. Limit visitors. Don't let people come onto your property if you think they've been on another farm. That's the simple solution. Obviously, family and friends, if they're not off a farm or if they're on a farm that you know the backstory of that farm and you know what's on there, then that should be fine. But if you've got visitors coming who are Department of Ag people, the electric line people that come and check the electricity lines, postal workers, road workers, where they're in soil all the time and stepping out into places all the time, just limit them coming into areas where your animals are. And that goes for all animals: cattle, goats, sheep, chickens, bees, the whole lot. You don't want people touching your stuff if they've been touching stuff on other farms and you don't know the hygiene or biosecurity for that farm. That's how things get spread. Clean equipment. You can keep equipment clean. I think preventing wild animals getting near the equipment is the best course. But if you have previously had wild animals coming in, like ducks and other birds coming into your chicken yard, clean your feeders, clean your waterers, and then try and lock them away so that they're not accessible by those wild animals. And observe your birds daily. Now, nobody knows your flock better than you. There are always some chickens that are quiet and stay in the corner and aren't as clucky, aren't as noisy, but you will know which ones they are if you're observing your flock all the time. You'll also be able to see as soon as a problem starts. So if a bird starts looking sick, if they've got any of the signs of avian influenza, you will notice it straight away if you are paying attention and observing your flock on a regular basis. Early detection matters because you need to be able to isolate that bird straight away. If they're not near the other birds, then the chance of them spreading it to the other birds is greatly reduced. And that goes the same for any kind of illness with chickens. As soon as you notice that a chicken has, issues with feet or skin or feathers or respiratory issues, straight away isolate it, because the chance of it spreading to other birds is going to drop right down as soon as you do that. Now, what signs to look for? And I had to look this up because I don't know. My birds have never had avian influenza. So, I'm assuming it's a respiratory issue, but, you never really know what they're going to be like. So, signs can vary. I'm going to read from a list. Possible symptoms include, and it's a good list, sudden unexplained death. That would probably do it. But that being said, you got to know your birds. If you have, like us, the Isa Browns, who will kill over at 3 years old, those deaths I'm not so worried about. They die at that age anyway. We have had roosters who were too big and have literally just had a heart attack. So if that happens and you haven't had wild birds coming in and there's no biosecurity issues, then you really have to know your flock in order to know whether or not that's something to be concerned about. But these other things are more specific to avian flu. Respiratory distress. Obviously, if a bird looks like it's struggling to breathe, then that's respiratory distress. Now, it could be other things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's avian flu, but it's something to watch for, and definitely isolate a bird. Coughing, sneezing. So obviously same kind of flu issues we have. Swollen heads. I didn't know that one. That one was a new one for me. Evidently their heads get a little bit bigger and puffier. Blue or purple combs. I'm going to guess that's due to not getting enough oxygen into their lungs. Like humans, you see humans that are struggling with breathing or respiratory issues. They sometimes get blue lips or a paler colour to their skin. Severe lethargy. I can never say that word. Lethargy. Severe lethargy. If they're not normally a bird that would be lethargic and they are suddenly, then that might be worth removing them from the flock just so you can monitor it. A significant drop in feed intake. So this would be more of an issue if the whole flock were exposed to it, and all of a sudden they're all feeling unwell and they're not eating as much, and you would notice a significant drop. And a sudden drop in egg production. Sick birds don't like making eggs. So if they're really sick, they're not going to be producing anywhere near as many eggs. I guess the really important point here is don't try and play vet on this one. This is one of these ones where, how I say sometimes that we try and manage illnesses with our chickens ourselves. We try and deal with it ourselves without having to go to the vet. And we tend not to take chickens to the vet for any kind of medical conditions where we would take, say, goats or cows or horses to a vet. We tend not to do that with our chickens. And that's because to us, our chickens, apart from, our special ones like goat chicken and Agnes, our chickens aren't necessarily a pet animal that we have. They really are livestock. This is one of those occasions where I would say if I had a bird that was showing signs of respiratory distress, knowing that we have avian flu in Australia, and playing it by ear, knowing that they don't have any other illness happening and that there's avian flu in your area, you've got to factor in all those things, then it might be a case where you would take a chicken to a vet. And of course, you would ring them in advance and say, I'm worried this animal has avian flu. They would likely want you to keep the animal in the car and come out and do any testing or swabbing that they needed to do out in your car. They're not going to want you to come into the vets with an animal that has a contagious illness. I know this from practice. Vets don't like contagious illnesses being in their facilities, and completely understandable because it does go through everything. But they may say, bring the bird in, we'll swab it. So they'll come out to your car, they'll swab it, they'll send the swabs off, and then they can decontaminate themselves before they go back in. They'll send it off as a swab, and that is a really good way to monitor if it is spreading. And certainly Department of Agriculture would be appreciative of you doing that. But also too, it's really important for you to know that so that you can manage your own livestock on your farm. So don't play vet on this one. If you have birds that become sick, and especially if you have multiple birds that become sick, definitely go to a vet and try and get a swab done. Now, should you lock your chickens up? It's a question everybody asks. Should I just lock them up so that wild birds can't come near them and they can't be exposed to things in the environment? And look, the answer is not necessarily. I think it really depends on local restrictions in your area. So keep an eye, like if you aren't already, go to Department of Ag website and have a look. There'll be a page there somewhere, and I'll try and find it and link it in the show notes. There'll be a page there somewhere where you can keep up to date on avian flu information. They will have local outbreaks and they will have biosecurity advice on there also. But they will tell you where there are areas where there are birds affected. If your birds become sick, or if you're in an area where it is an issue and it's close by, then I would definitely say you have to play it by ear on what's best for your circumstances, but I would likely lock my chickens up and keep them in a closed, and we've got a large fixed run here that I would put them into that I can close off to stop any wildlife getting into, and keep them in there just short term until they get a handle on the situation. But biosecurity, use your biosecurity measures to prevent wild birds getting anywhere near your chickens is probably the best bet. Free-ranging chickens are healthier and happier. So if you have healthy, happier birds, they're less likely to become sick. Unfortunately, with things like this avian flu, it is very, very contagious. So if you are free-ranging your birds, there is a chance that they will be exposed to it if it ends up in your area. But have a balanced approach. Don't panic. Monitor the situation. Follow advice on the Department of Ag web pages. I know I always bitch and moan about mainstream media and how sometimes they're not honest and sometimes they try and exaggerate things for the purposes of selling news, which is what their job is. But this is one of those things where you kind of really need to keep a bit of a monitor going on it. Now, will egg prices go up again? Sure as shit. I'm going to say that. Consumers are always at risk when these kinds of things happen. And I kind of get a bit jaded, and I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I feel like every time something like this happens, egg prices go through the roof. Buying birds will become harder. Buying chicken feed will become harder. For some reason, everything just goes fucking pear-shaped. And look, after we went through COVID, the whole toilet paper, issue, it doesn't surprise me anymore when it happens. But flocks may end up getting culled if it spreads. If an outbreak occurs, flocks may get culled. That will mean that supply will drop of eggs. Prices will increase because that's the way it works, supply and demand. Backyard flocks are going to help you if you want a supply of eggs and you don't want it impacted by the supermarkets. That being said, obviously, if it's in your area, it's going to be very hard. You're going to have to manage it. Don't go into the situation fear-based. Go into it with some practical planning and have an idea in your head about what you're going to do if avian flu ends up in an area nearby you. Like I say, just because it's near you, it doesn't mean that it's going to end up in your flock, but you do have to work through that. Now, the biggest mistakes that people make during these kind of scenarios is, one, they panic and either get rid of all their chickens, which I saw somebody advertise actually yesterday that they were getting rid of all their chickens. They had about 30 of them. I was like, I wonder if they're doing that because of avian flu, because that might be a bit of an extreme reaction. Certainly I wouldn't be panicking just yet. Monitor the situation, but don't panic. Mistake number 2 is ignoring biosecurity. I think this applies at any time, not when we have bird flu in Australia, but at any time. Don't ignore biosecurity. There's more chance of all your animals getting sick if you ignore biosecurity. So I would say put biosecurity methods in place now so that you don't have to worry about changing things later. Trusting random Facebook experts is mistake number 3. There's so much chatter on the chicken pages already about avian flu. Oh my God, what's this mean for us? I would say go to the Department of Ag website and really have a look there. Facebook people, you don't know. That could just be somebody sitting there typing at a computer that has no chickens, has no clue. You don't know. Just because they've got a chicken in their profile or some pictures on their page of chickens, it doesn't mean they're an expert. Number 4, assuming that it can never affect small flocks. Look, it absolutely affects commercial producers much more than it does smaller flocks. But if it ends up in the area where you live, then it can absolutely affect your flock and it can wipe them out. And, once they're wiped out, if that happens, you can start again, but you'll have to go through that whole process of checking with Department of Ag to see how long the contaminants stay in the coop that you've got around the feeders. You'd have to wash everything. You'd have to sterilise everything. It would be a real pain in the ass. So not getting it in there is going to be easier than trying to deal with it after the fact. And mistake number 5 is making decisions based on fear instead of facts. And I think that's really important. Don't let rumours run away. If you are in Western Australia and listening to this, I would say jump onto the Department of Ag websites in Western Australia and see what they're doing about it. And I'm going to do that after I've recorded this. I didn't do it before because I was racing through to do other things. But I'll go and have a look at that, and I'll try and put a link in there so that people know where to go to find information. But they will advertise. And they do. They let people know. They did it with the varroa mite. They had hotspots where they were showing us where varroa mite was showing up. So it's really important to go to those pages and keep an eye on that. And that way you're not dealing with fear. You are dealing with just pure facts. Anyway, that is it on bird flu for me. And look, I think it's just really important that we don't all panic and go crazy with, oh my God, the sky is falling, that's bird flu. I think biosecurity is something that is important at any time of the year and during any circumstances. So if you didn't have biosecurity in place before this should be a really good wake-up call for you to put biosecurity measures in place on your property. That being said, I don't want you to panic about it. Just go through it methodically. I can't even say it. Go through it step by step and make sure that you've got the water is contained, you've got the feeders contained, you've got a lid on your coop so that wild birds just can't come in, at their own will kind of thing. Do all that. Make sure you've got an area where you can quarantine a bird if it gets sick. That's something that a lot of people don't think about prior to these things. Just a small run, a small cage, even like a puppy pen is enough to keep a sick bird in. You want to be able to move a bird out quickly if you notice one that is sick. And keep an eye on the webpage, the Department of Ag webpage. Like I say, I'll try and find a link for it and do that. You don't need to sell your flock. You don't doom scroll on Facebook. I try not to doom scroll on Facebook anyway. It's just such a black hole of you get sucked in and you never come out of it. Put in sensible biosecurity measures. Pay attention to your flock. Check them every day. Watch your birds and know your birds is a good one. And I think it's really important to know that the best chicken keepers are the ones that don't panic when these kind of things happen. They're just ones who prepare and go through it in a methodical, that was the word I was looking for before, methodical fashion, where they just double check that everything is in place to keep their flock healthy and happy. Anyway, that's it for me until next week. And I can't even remember what we're talking about next week. I think we're talking about eggs and preserving because you've probably just gone through the molting phase and have no eggs. So we're going to talk about eggs and preserving, I think, next week. Don't hold me to that. I could be wrong. And don't forget to jump on the wait list, or not the wait list, on the email list so that you can then get on the wait list for the book when it comes out, Eggs Without Cartons. And I will maybe even go back and make sure that I've got a paragraph or two on avian flu in the book, because I'm not sure that I did discuss it, because we don't really have a lot of problems here in Australia with it. But be prepared, keep an eye out, pay attention to what's going on, and keep your flock nice and healthy and happy and safe. And that's it for me for this week. Bye for now. Talk next week. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojahomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.